recognize this person?
It's you.
Oh, damn. Where's the slides?
I guess we have some technical difficulties here, but it's okay. Okay.
Yay.
That person.
It's you again? No.
It probably is, but not this morning.
Okay.
So I'd ask you to maybe look a little bit carefully. You know, look at the eyes. You know, are you sure? Is it someone you know? If any of you have ever been on call and maybe been woken up in the middle of the night to deal with, this gentleman here recognizes them, to deal with a high priority operational incident, maybe you don't just recognize them. Oh, maybe you are them.
What's happening? Yay!
There we go. Thank you.
Good. Let's talk about cheese then.
Okay, I've made mozzarella before.
You made mozzarella at home.
At home.
You need to use a special milk, right? You shouldn't be pasteurized, I guess.
Yes, that's right.
Okay.
I've made.
That's true. No, because I tried myself as well, but it didn't go well. So.
No. And I burnt my hands. I should have used.
Exactly.
The
So
water
don't do
was too
mozzarella
hot.
at home.
It was too hot. Okay, so
we're
going
back.
Thank you. So maybe you don't just recognize them. Maybe there's a little part of you that is this person. So as Alessandro introduced, I'm Lina Mooneeram. I am a senior platform engineer.
And I am Nanuti. I'm a senior software engineer.
And we're going to spend some time today telling you more about Runbooks than you probably ever wanted to know. And the reason is that both Diana and I genuinely believe that Runbooks are key to increased and a good developer experience, which impacts on developer productivity and ultimately impacts on the resilience and stability of your software. So we'll spend some time telling you a little bit of what we think a Runbook is to try and make sure that we're all on the same page. Then we'll tell you why we think it matters. Diana then will take you through the lows and the highs of what a really bad Runbook is, and then what we think a really good Runbook, the gold standard, is. And then I'll finish up with hopefully giving you some steps and some tips about how you can elevate your Runbook, how you can take them from 0 to 100, and then about bringing that back round to, we're at a developer experience conference. What have Runbooks got to do with developer experience? And that's how we'll end up. So Diana, what is a Runbook?
Thank you, Lina. Well, a Runbook is a guide with step-by-step instructions that tell you how to complete a process or a complex task. It's basically a recipe of how to resolve that in a consistent and efficient manner. And it's not only that, it's a living document. You don't just create a Runbook and forget about it. You need to keep it updated. We are dealing with constant changes in our experience, and we need to make sure that our Runbook keeps up with the code changes, with the process changes, with the infrastructure updates. And the Runbook is often heard about in the context of incidents, but it's useful for any kind of repetitive process. It's not just for on-call. I mean, all of us have been new hires in a company, and if you don't have a Runbook for onboarding, it's probably a daunting experience. Now that we are all on the same page with what Runbook is, Lina, please help us to learn more why do Runbooks matter.
Absolutely. Why should we care about Runbooks? Why do they matter? We're here to talk about developer experience, not an instruction manual, right? But as we've heard from Guillaume and Hedvish, onboarding matters. And also, if we remember our colleague and our friend that we saw at the beginning of the slides, having a good Runbook, if you're woken up in the middle of the night having to deal with that high priority incident, it's a high stress environment, it's complex. Having that step-by-step set of instructions to follow when you're tired and you're not really sure what's going on can be a key difference to how you approach that incident. It can help you be more efficient in the way that you approach and you resolve it. But also, It impacts on minimizing your downtime. So again, so referring to Mario and the Dora metrics, having a good run book can reduce your mean time to recovery. And again, so kind of talking about if you're an onboarding engineer, so you're new to the team, perhaps maybe you're new to the organization, a good run book and an up-to-date run book can be key in terms of asynchronously transferring information. We've all been a new engineer and nobody really likes, kind of bugging your colleague, how do I do this? Or, I've tried to do this and it doesn't work and I don't have the permissions. What permissions do I need? If it's there and it's clear and it's accessible, you're productive much more easily, much more quickly, and you're much more confident and empowered as an engineer. So if you have all of that and you have those clear instructions as a seasoned engineer or a new engineer, you're able to help your team scale, and also having those well-tested, well-defined steps helps reduce not necessarily the number of errors, it can just certainly reduce the scope for errors.
Well, now, you know me already. I'm curious by nature, so I have a question for you. What do you think is the worst runbook?
Okay, what's the worst runbook? I'm sure you all have your own answers, but for me, actually, the worst runbook is no runbook. So I'm trying to do something, it's relatively new, I'm not really familiar with it, and I don't really know where to start. I don't know what permissions I need, I don't know even where to look or where to access the information, so no runbook.
I totally agree with that, but even when there is a runbook, sometimes it can be as ineffective as no runbook. And one of the key challenges I've encountered so far in my software engineering experience are the content quality issues of a runbook. So just imagine having some vague instructions in your runbook, basically imprecise or unclear steps that leave room for interpretation, where let's say you have an on-call runbook that just states restart the server if it stops responding. That's not telling much, right? It's not telling you how to identify the server that is not responding, what that does not responding actually mean, and how to actually restart it with minimal downtime, of course, and perhaps no impact to the customers. And not only that, but we can also have missing context. And here, even though they are quite similar, there's a bit of nuance. Missing context means that there's some absence of background information. Basically, let's think about hiring now and onboarding, as I said earlier. When we have a new hire in our company, we need to provide them some login credentials. But if our runbook just states provide the new hire their login credentials, and let's assume that their manager is also new to the company, they don't have that background context. They don't know where to go to actually provide those login credentials, and they don't know to which systems they need to have access to, and so on and so forth. So we need to have our runbooks in a balanced manner with clear, actionable steps. And assuming that we sorted out the content quality issues, and we think about what else could go wrong, well, we failed to maintain it, right? And this usually happens due to lack of ownership. And I'm not saying this in the sense of like pointing fingers or blaming anyone. It's just that under that constant pressure and under that constant change, we have higher priorities and we don't think of runbooks. And here I think is room to improve and to influence, actually. If you don't have a predefined process for your runbooks, and if you don't have perhaps someone advocating for them in your team, then maybe there's room for you to be that person. Maybe there's room for you to influence your team, your organization, and even broader, your entire company. You can establish an effective process to keep your runbooks up to date and to keep them useful, because you need to be kind to that 3 a.m. self, right? You don't want to wake up in the middle of the night and have instructions that you don't actually know if they work. And not only that, but assuming that we sort of keep our runbooks updated, then we might end up having multiple versions of the same runbook floating around. So what do we do then? Well, we need to sort out the version control issues. And how can we do that? The simplest step would be just store them with your code, right? You can just have your runbook as I don't know, a README template initially, and then you can just create perhaps a Jupyter notebook out of it, and you can store them with your code. You can peer review them. You can have that minimal process that you apply for your code changes as well for your runbooks. Okay, so we have the content quality, we have sorted out the updates, but we can nitpick on something else. We can nitpick on usability and accessibility. Just imagine being awake in the middle of the night and having to look at a long, unformatted document, unstructured. Just a long document, no paragraphs, no headings, no bullet points, inconsistent font sizes. It might be comprehensive in terms of information. It might give you all the details you need, but you might be half asleep. Is it really useful to try to navigate through that doc? No. So you need to take care of the way you present that information in your runbook as well. And not only that, but you need to think about how you present it. How complex is the language that you are actually using in your runbook? Because we are not all of us are English speakers. I'm not. I'm struggling sometimes to express myself in English, like I'm probably doing during this talk. So we need to bypass those accessibility barriers. And the runbook should be easy to follow by anyone at any time, being it day or night, and regardless of their experience on the project or tenure in the company. Okay, I probably bored you enough with what could go wrong, so let's see how we can make it better. And here we are proposing you a standard, like Lina called out earlier, which we sort of broke down into. First of all is like the investigation part, which you can think of as the steps that you do without side effects on your production system or on your local environment. Basically, sort of the checks and what points you that's the right runbook for you to follow. And then we will move towards the execution, which is more towards the applicable actions in the context that you might be. So first of all, here we have the process type. We need to know what kind of process we are dealing with. Is it an onboarding process? Is it resolving a certain type of incident? Is it just restarting that server in production in an efficient manner? We should have that most likely in a short runbook title, just to know that we are following the right direction. And then we need a short description. We need a more comprehensive explanation there, because we should know exactly that after we clicked on that runbook, we are going to find there what we are expecting. And after that, we should have those immediate steps, which are essentially the validations that we need to do. So if we think of on-call, those could be just check this metric or look at that dashboard and confirm that this is the incident that you think you are dealing with. And if you think of onboarding, it could be just find out if you have certain permissions or if you have access to your team's Git repository. And after that, we should have some resources, basically a list of key tools and documents and links. And these, of course, go hand in hand with the immediate steps. But so if you have a step that tells you to check a dashboard, you need to have the link to that dashboard, but even better to have it embedded there in your runbook. But there might be occasions where you need some extra resources. So assuming that you checked all those runbooks, all those dashboards, and those didn't help you, perhaps you will need to do a log type. You might not always need to do it, but it would be helpful to have that link just in the runbook so that you don't need to go and browse for it somewhere else. And then we can move to the execution part. Here we have the key actions. So what are the immediate actions that we can apply in order to either mitigate an impact in case of on-call or to just continue with our onboarding process and smooth our experience? And perhaps it's just a list of tools, of commands that you need to run or of tools that you can use. And those should be descriptive enough, so there shouldn't be room for guessing. If you need to restart a server, then you need to have exactly the command used to do that. You need to have exactly the checks that you need to perform afterwards to make sure that that has been successfully executed. And if you think of onboarding, you will have the exact tools that you need to install and the exact projects that you need to clone. And not only that, but you might get into the point where you get stuck, or maybe you are trying to apply those actions and they don't work as expected. Maybe we failed to update that runbook, or we had some updates on our local system and they don't work anymore. So if you face that, you need to know who to call for help. You need a list of key people or teams to either escalate to if it's on call, or just ask for help if it's onboarding. I mean, and you also need to know when and how to do that. So for example, you won't go straight during an incident, you won't go straight to, I don't know, your director or your skip manager if you didn't escalate initially to your team, or to the on-call manager, or in onboarding, you won't go directly to a subject matter expert in your company if you didn't ask your onboarding buddy why something is not working. And of course, the last two are more like optional steps, but you need to constantly think how you can improve. What are the future improvements you can do? And I left the seventh one as, let's say, mandatory, because I think it's essential to have a document where you can just pinpoint the ideas, because maybe you have an idea of how to automate something or how to improve something. You don't have time to do it at 3 a.m. and probably it's not recommended to do it anyway. But you have the idea, and you need to make sure that you write that down so that you don't forget about it. Probably you'll have time afterwards, or maybe another colleague will pick it up. But if you have an idea to improve something, just write it down. And in terms of on-call, I called that out. I like a lot the 5 whys technique, where it's the practice where you constantly ask yourself why until you drill down to the root cause, or basically repeat that process until you break down those systems to what actually caused them. And last but not least, we have the communication strategies, where I don't think of them as like the contact points. They are different, because just imagine if you have your service in production and it's down for a while, and perhaps you breach an SLA. Well, if that happens, then you'll need to communicate that in a certain manner to your end users, and you need to have that process defined. And maybe it will not be the on-call engineer who does that, but that should be written down so that it's clear for the team what they need to do and how they need to do it. And maybe you had your service down due to an upstream dependency. Then you need to know what kind of ticket you have to cut to the responsible team in order to support you further. And now that we've seen the standard, let's get back to Lina to learn how to elevate our runbooks further.
Thank you, Diana. So I did promise that we'd tell you more about runbooks than you ever wanted to know. And the reason we do that is because we think that they're key to developer experience. So if you have developers, you have a developer experience. The key is to try and get a good one and to get a good, high-quality developer experience. I feel a little bit like we're going to let you into a secret. And the secret is that to actually get good developer and high quality developer experience, you don't actually need a new tool or some new magic app. I think actually all you actually need to do is update your runbooks. So what we're going to talk about is, how do you get from like 0 to 100? You know, perhaps 100 is a little bit too much. How do you get from 0 to 80? Pareto told us that getting to 80 was the easy bit, right? So what you can do, the first thing to elevate your runbooks is actually have one. Okay, so if there is a complex situation or a complex task, have a runbook. Certainly will make it a lot easier in the middle of the night, whether it's 3 o'clock in the morning or 3 o'clock in the afternoon, to complete that task. The second thing that you can do that actually really does elevate your runbook is actually own it. So if there's a runbook, things that get owned get looked after. So own your runbooks. If you have runbooks or sets of instructions for your team, own them by the team. Another thing that you can do is actually follow the conventions. So it doesn't necessarily have to be the conventions and have all the steps. that Diana set out, but actually have a convention and agree a convention. So it's great for your team. We heard from Mario about cognitive load. So if you know what to expect in your runbooks, if you know where to look for your runbooks, that's a significant part of the cognitive load for engineers, hopefully removed. So have a convention within your team. Own your runbooks. Make them look relatively similar. Have all the similar sorts of information, all the things that you know are common sense, and you want them at 3 o'clock in the morning, but they're not just there. So it'll be great if you have that convention within your team. Even better if you can have that convention across engineering. And the gold standard, again, if you can get it across your organization. If every engineer, every individual knows where to find the runbooks or your instructions and knows what to expect and has the confidence that they will do what they need them to do and help them achieve their goals. And then finally, to get to that 80%, keep them relevant. We've given you lots of headings and things that you could potentially have in your runbook, but it doesn't help anyone if you just cram it full of information. What you don't want to do when you're fixing something that needs to be done really quickly is you don't want to wade through information. You want it to be focused, targeted at the task in hand, so keep it focused. If you want to then take it from that 80% to 100, how do we do that? You can see up there already, I'm mentioning the magic A word, AI word, and I think we've kind of mentioned it and touched on it on a number of different talks this morning, and I'm sure we will be talking about it again within platform engineering. But AI is a great tool when it comes to runbooks, and certainly instructions. Now, there's a bit of an anecdote that I hear a lot, which is you ask engineers, what's a big barrier for them being productive and being able to achieve their goals? And a lot of the times what they will say is that there's no documentation, or the documentation is really bad. You ask those same engineers, what's their least favorite task? What's the thing that they don't want to do? And generally, it's writing documentation. So maybe what we do is we use AI not to write the next Bitcoin mining algorithm, but actually use it to do the task that you don't want to do. So use it to write your runbook, so at least get you started on a runbook. Now, Diana and I have actually internally, a number of times, pointed our internal AI tool at incident channels after the fact. Or as a platform engineer, we monitor a support channel. I've pointed it at conversations that I've had with other application engineers about how to achieve a certain goal. And what that means is, as a platform engineer, I don't have to explain the same thing 20 times. It's there, it's based on real-world scenarios and real-world questions, and it's available. And all I need to do is tweak it a little bit and publish it. And certainly with the incident runbook, we're basing it on real-world interactions, so we can see exactly what was checked, what information we needed, who we needed to contact. And again, you get started. AI gives you a boost, and you can get started with your very basic runbook, and it's better than nothing. It's better than generally where you started. The other, obviously, key advantage with using AI, certainly in terms of generating runbooks, is you can do it on demand, and it possibly takes, certainly with the prompts that we've done, we can get a good start on a runbook within 30 seconds. That might have taken me maybe an hour to draft initially, so you can get it on demand based on real-world incidents. The next thing that you can do that kind of push it up towards that 100% is automate it. We're mostly engineers here, I believe. If you're writing runbooks, you've got any number of tasks, and generally you'll have some commonality across your runbooks. So if you can find those areas of commonality, let's script it. And if you can script it, that means it can be peer-reviewed, it means it can be tested. You can also sometimes give your scripts elevated permissions that you perhaps wouldn't give just a standard engineer. You can do that all in a safe, repeatable way. So absolutely automate it, and then when you run your scripts, you're able to add your metrics and see where the failure points are. The last one came up a little bit earlier than I was expecting, because I think for me as well, perhaps, maybe the holy grail is actually not having a runbook. And I know that I said at the beginning, or a little bit earlier, that having no runbook was the worst runbook for me. Maybe what we can do is we can work towards having kind of self-healing applications and self-healing systems. Now, I know that there are a number of incident management organizations and companies that allow you to automate your workflows. So once you've got your runbook already set up, you know what steps you need to take. What you can do is feed those steps into the incident management company's kind of UIs or processes, and it will let you then, so the moment a similar trigger or an alert or an incident matching certain criteria happens, it automatically runs your runbook. And perhaps then what that means is that as an engineer, you're only called out when that automated runbook fails. So that would take you, hopefully, towards that 100%. So going back to it then, why do we care? We're here at a developer experience conference. Why again are we talking about incident management runbooks or, sets of instructions? And hopefully what we're showing you is that actually having a runbook can have a massive impact on improving the quality of developer experience across your organization. And actually, it doesn't have to be just for developers. We've all got colleagues that are perhaps not in engineering or not engineers, but work within and with engineer teams that are able to follow these steps of instructions if they're clear and they're clearly kind of demarcated and listed. So hopefully what we'll see, or what we've seen, is that having a good, clear set of instructions, those step-by-step instructions, your cognitive load, particularly in those complex, high-stress environments, is significantly reduced. That then gives you that increased confidence that if you are woken up at 3 o'clock in the morning, that you will be able to resolve the incident. And if you aren't, you know who to contact and you know what to do, and it's clear. So even if that happens at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, I'm equally as stressed when I get called out for an incident at 3 o'clock in the afternoon as I am at 3 in the morning. I'm empowered, and I have the confidence to deal with it on my own a lot of the times. So if connecting back to Hedvish and Guillaume when they were talking about onboarding, having good, clear runbooks, I'm sure this is a part potentially of your program, but having good, clear runbooks are great for that new engineer and new team member. They can get in, they can ramp up, they can be productive and feel productive, and actually feel as if they're a contributing part of the team much more quickly and actually with much more confidence. And then hopefully, again, we're at a developer experience conference. We believe that happy engineers are productive engineers. And in fact, if any of you are on LinkedIn as much as I am, you might have noticed that Gartner released or teased some new research over the last couple of days. And their research has shown that high quality developer experience can have up to a 44% impact, positive impact on developer productivity. So good runbooks, impact on your developer experience, have a massive impact on your developer productivity, your engineering productivity. And they're easy to follow. So you can do a task potentially within maybe half an hour that could have taken you much longer than that as you're looking for information and trying to remember what it was that you did when you last ran it 3 months ago. And then finally, for reliability. Now, Diana and I are absolutely not saying that having good runbooks will reduce the number of incidents. They won't do that. If you've got a high number of incidents, you probably will still carry on having a high number of incidents. But what they will do is reduce your mean time to recovery. They will mean that as an engineer, you're able to diagnose and resolve any issue that you have a runbook for much more quickly, much more effectively, and with confidence and without stress, hopefully.
Thank you, Lena. Now that we saw how impactful they are, I think I have one more question for you.
Ooh.
What do you think is the key takeaway for our audience to take home?
I'm coming back here because I have to remember what it is. There we go. I should have remembered that, right? So the key takeaway, so obviously that you're all here, what I would really love you to take away is that runbooks matter, right? They make a difference. They make a difference to every engineer and perhaps every member of your team. And if I had to give you a call to action, is if you have a runbook that you wouldn't trust at 3 o'clock in the morning, audit it, take a look, work out how you can fix it. What about you, Diana?
I was sure it's coming back to me. Well, I think conventions matter. I mean, I already shared the standard, but I feel like whenever you have something clearly defined, it improves your developer experience and productivity, as Lena called out. So group your runbooks, have them in a standardized manner. Your project might move to another team, or you might move to another team. You should be able to easily find those runbooks and to be able to follow them because they are consistent with what you've used to. And I think I want to pin it back to you. So what do you think is the next one?
Okay, so if I remembered it correctly, my second takeaway is to automate. So if you can, yeah, I got it right. If you can, and you've got these great runbooks, but you know what, you're repeating a number of the steps across all your runbooks, perhaps you can look for a way to automate it and script it. And again, going back to that, it means that it gets peer reviewed and tested. You get the final word. You get the final word.
Yeah, last but not least, the buzzword these days, AI. So, you know the script Lena mentioned earlier that you can have it automated? Well, you can do that with AI because it's not necessarily fun or productive to just keep automating runbooks just by yourself. And not only that, you can move beyond AI-driven automation. You can try to move towards predictability. You can have AI models that predict when an issue might be happening based on your logs and on your past incidents. And then maybe you can lean in and move towards those self-healing incidents that Lena mentioned. How we can do that? Well, we can have AI not only predict when an incident can happen, but actually take proactive steps to prevent that from happening. And this was us.
Yeah, so we just want to say thank you for joining us on the Runbook journey. These are our contact details here, and we just like to leave you with one last takeaway, which is that if you can, work away from being like our friend here and more towards this person here. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. So there are some questions. First thing I wanted to ask to the crowd, how many of you are on call?
No.
Not that many, so they sleep very well. So I'm on call, I'm always on call. So I'm asking this because I think that maybe some people are not used to be on call or incidents and stuff like that. Probably you're lucky. So there are some questions of some examples of when shall we use runbooks.
Sure.
I can provide my experience. For example, easily we are using Datadog for monitoring, for observability. If something goes down, it's not performing as expected, an alert goes to PagerDuty, and I get a page, and usually in the page I also have a document that says, hey, this service is going down. Here's the runbook based on previous incidents and stuff like that. But yeah, now maybe I'll leave it to you to give other example of which topics, for example, runbooks are.
Absolutely. So runbooks, as Diana said, are not just for incident management. They're not just for instance. They are invaluable for onboarding engineers to complex environments, or even perhaps, even if they're new to a company or if they're new to a team. Every team is different. The way that we do things within a team is different. And sometimes it can be just as simple as a how-to, how do I do this? How do I create a new service? That's a runbook. How do I find out this particular set of information? It's a runbook. So effectively, I would say anything that you have to do more than 2 or 3 times, create a set of instructions, and again, we can use AI for that. So it doesn't need to be overly complex. Diana?
Circling back to what Tirpo called out, well, for on-call in general, if you have defined an alarm, then that means you know something will go wrong. And if that something goes wrong, then you need to know how to fix it. And by the time you are setting up that alarm or metric or whatever, you know what's about to go wrong, and you probably have an idea of how to mitigate that. So why not just write that down to have it for that 3 a.m. incident?
Yeah, I also think that in some scenarios, runbooks are mandatory. For example, especially in big companies where teams are frequently changing or you're moving services ownership to other teams, that is something that happens every day. So you cannot assume that they will always have a ramp up or full knowledge about the services. So runbooks in this case for incidents are essential. Is Notebook LM by Google a good way to set up a runbook?
Oh, I don't know. We
I
could
haven't
try
tried
it.
it.
We can try.
I've used it. I mean, I would say use what tool works. Every organization is different. Every team is different. Obviously, convention is great. You know, it doesn't help if one team is using one particular tool, but then you move to another team and they've got a completely different setup, because all you're doing is potentially adding to the cognitive load. So if you can try and agree a convention, then that's great. And I'm always a big fan of simplicity.
The other question that I have is that how many runbooks do you have in your company, if you know that, and how do you keep the number limited if it's an issue?
Diana, do you want to take this one? Or?
I'm not aware of the number of Runbooks in the company. I know there are a couple of ones for my team, and they are usually specific to what you need to do in production. And if you think about it, it sort of makes sense, because whenever you are changing something in production, you might not always get the results that you want, and you need to be able to pinpoint what went wrong and circle back to that and roll back. So even though I don't have an explicit number of runbooks, I don't think it's necessarily something that you need to measure, as long as they don't overwhelm the engineers while maintaining them.
Well, I would add to that, and I would say another key part is ownership, which we mentioned earlier. And if you own something, it's okay to kill it, right? So if you have a runbook that is no longer useful or is perhaps being duplicated in too many places, part of owning it is that you're maintaining a good, manageable number. So if something is no longer useful, let's get rid of it. So you don't have to keep adding to the number of runbooks. They just need to work and be effective.
There's a question that I would like to answer, but how do you deal with the fact that nobody ever wants to write an update documentation, even with AI?
We do a talk and then we come to a conference and try and encourage people. I think sometimes you really maybe only ever feel the need for a runbook when you don't have one. And so I think what I would want to do is leverage that pain and find a solution and contribute to a solution. The AI certainly makes it so much more easy.
Can I provide a harsh answer?
Yes.
So it's your job, it's your responsibility, right? You own a service. So at the end of the day, documentation is not, oh, okay, I have documentation. It needs to be useful. And also you own that service. So
yeah.
Sorry, I've been harsh a little bit.
Spoken like a manager.
Oh, shit. Okay. Do you have runbooks for cheese making?
Yeah, there's loads online, but they don't tell you that you have how to protect your hands, which is why I burned my hands making mozzarella.
Cool. Thank you so much again.
Thank you.
Round of applause.
Thank you.